Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Walk and Talk Wednesday, where you all ask the questions, we go on a little walk, I do the talking, and then hopefully by the end of the trail, I've answered your question for you. My name is Father Chase, and it is a wet Walk and Talk Wednesday. It has been raining like crazy, and so I want to get to this week's question, hopefully before the clouds open up again. So, what is grace? You know, grace is one of those terms that Christians throw around a lot. We talk about God's grace, we sing about God's grace, we have studies about God's grace, but do we really understand what it is that we're talking about when we talk about grace? You know, whenever I ask somebody what they mean by grace, I'm often met with blank stares or shoulder shrugs, and then sometimes crazy definitions which really show that the person has no clue what they're talking about when they're talking about grace. But grace is so important to us as Christians. I mean, grace is the basis of our salvation. It's the basis of our spiritual growth. Without grace, we wouldn't be saved. Grace is absolutely critical for us to understand. Grace also reveals a whole lot about who God is and His character and nature. So it's really important that we understand what it is we're talking about when we talk about grace. So today I want you to leave with 3 takeaways about grace, which hopefully will give you a clearer understanding of what it is. So let's start with a basic definition of grace. According to the Anglican Church's Catechism, grace is defined as God's gift of His love, mercy, and help, which He freely gives to us, who, because of our sinfulness, deserve only condemnation. It's a good definition. It is His gift of love, mercy, and help to us, which we don't deserve. So 3 takeaways from that definition. Let's unpack this a little bit. First, grace is a gift. When you think of the word grace, you should think of a big shiny present with a nice big red bow on top. The image in your mind should be that of a gift, because that's what grace is. It is a gift to us from God. That's an important image to keep in mind because it also reveals a whole lot about who God is. You know, when people think about God, I think too many think of this, ominous being up in the clouds who is just utterly disgusted by us, who's, repulsed by us, who regrets ever creating us, who's just unimpressed with us. And I think people have 2 responses to that image in their mind. One, they can reject God. That is, if I'm not good enough for God, then He's not good enough for me. So they just kind of reject God altogether. Or 2, they say to themselves, well, maybe I can impress or appease this disgusted, disgruntled, ominous, angry God. Maybe I can act good enough that He'll accept me. And so some people try to work really hard at appeasing this angry God that they've imagined in their mind. But grace says, no. You've got that whole image all wrong. Grace says, God's not angry with us. God's not disappointed in us. Sure, He's disgusted by our sin. He's angry that we sin. The Bible says He's wrathful towards our sin. It's a very powerful word. But it's not towards us personally. It's towards the sin which is in our lives. And grace proves this because God gives us a gift even while we were in the midst of our sin. Even while we're in the midst of our rebellion against God, God gives us this amazing gift. I don't know about you, but I usually only give gifts to people that I love and care about. I don't give them to people I just don't like. So because we've gotten this gift of grace, it reveals to us that God loves and cares and He's not disgusted or angry by us. Yes, He doesn't like our sin. I'm not going to downplay that. But that doesn't mean He doesn't love us. He doesn't care about us. It reveals a whole lot about who God is. Paul, in his book or his letter to the Ephesian church, says it like this. Grace is a gift of God, not by works, which means there is nothing we've done in our lives that has ever earned God's love, mercy, or help. It has been given to us as a gift. The second takeaway is this. God's grace is the gift of our salvation. Again, the Apostle Paul, now writing to the Roman church, says it like this. He says, all are justified, which is a fancy way of saying all are saved by grace as a gift through the redemption in Jesus Christ. People have summarized this in a cute little acronym, which is, grace is God's righteousness at Christ's expense. What this means is, because we were all born in sin, and because we've all rebelled and acted sinfully towards God, we've done wrong, and because God is absolutely holy, the consequence, what we deserve, is to be separated from God, to be eternally separated from God. But God says, I don't want that. I want my people to be with me. I want a relationship with these people, so I'm going to make them clean. I'm going to purify them. I'm going to give them the gift of salvation so we can have a relationship again by sacrificing my son, Jesus, on their behalf. Think of it like this. A couple years ago, I was doing this wedding, and this woman had her little toddler of a nephew as the ring bearer. And the wedding day, she is dressed, in this beautiful white wedding dress, and the little nephew, right before the wedding, he had gotten himself into a delicious chocolate chip cookie, but the chocolate right before the wedding was all over his face, all over his hands. And when he saw his aunt, he wanted to run up and give her the biggest bear hug you could ever imagine. Now listen, that aunt loved her nephew, but there was nothing that was going to allow him to hug his aunt 5 minutes before the wedding with all of that chocolate covering him. Well, that chocolate is kind of like our sin. We are covered, we are filthy. Isaiah says that we are made filthy by our sin. And God, He's like that woman in her beautiful white wedding dress. He's absolutely pure and holy. And we can't get near Him because that would make Him unholy. But God sacrifices His Son and allows us to become holy by going to the cross and taking our place, dying on our behalf, so that we can then be made clean and have a relationship with Him again. That's what grace is. It is being made righteous, being made clean at the expense of what Christ paid on the cross. Takeaway number 3. Not only is grace the gift of our salvation, grace is a gift that keeps on giving. What I mean by that is this. Not only does grace save us from our past sin, but grace also helps us to avoid future sin and to live lives that look like the way Jesus lived His life. It helps us with our spiritual growth. Another way of saying this is it helps us in our sanctification process, our process of becoming holy people. But we can't do that on our own. Because of our sinful desires, because of our temptation, we couldn't do that. So God helps us and enables and empowers us through grace. Again, the Apostle Paul, this time writing to a guy named Titus, put it like this. He says, by grace we are trained to reject all worldliness and ungodliness and to live upright, self-controlled, godly lives. Think of it like this. I once worked with this guy who loved and cared for his son, but I'll tell you, his son made it really hard for this guy to love him. His son, was an alcoholic. He could not carry a job, and he managed to get himself in a lot of debt. He started to get himself in trouble with the law, but through it all, this guy never stopped loving his son. He never stopped caring for him. But the son just never really accepted his father's love. His father over and over again offered to help his son clean up his life, quit the booze, and get a job. But the son just continuously rejected his father's gift. Until eventually he got himself into a DUI car accident and lost his driver's license and had to spend some time in jail. After that, the son decided to take up his dad's offer. And not only did that dad bail his son out of jail, but then he paid for therapy, he got him into rehab, and when he finally got himself all sobered up, he paid for his son to go back to trade school so that he could get a decent job where he'd make a good living. Well, that's kind of what God does for us, right? God saves us from our past sin. He saves us from our filthiness. But then he helps us to keep us from getting filthy again. And he helps us to live out the Christian life. One final thing I want to say about grace is this. This gift has been given to each of us. We've all been offered the gift of God's grace. But we might not have all accepted the gift of grace. What I mean by that is this. Some of us have this amazing gift with a big shiny bow on top sitting in our laps, but we just haven't opened it up and made it our own yet. Again, Paul, one final time, said it like this when he wrote to the Ephesians. He says, "By grace we were saved through faith." By grace we are saved through faith. So if grace is a gift, which is freely given to us, then the way we accept that gift, the way we open it up and make it our own, is through faith in Jesus Christ. So if you haven't placed your faith in Jesus, then you might be holding on to a box that you haven't opened up yet, and a gift you really haven't made your own. I've known a lot of people who've gone to church, who've been in youth groups and church choirs and volunteered and, been on church boards, but they've never opened up the gift of grace. They've never experienced salvation in their life, and they've never experienced the freeing of their sinful desires, the freeing from their temptations. And so if you're at home today and you haven't opened up this wonderful gift, then I want to encourage you to open up that gift today and make grace your own. Well, that's the end of this week's Walk and Talk. If you have any questions or comments, please make them down below, or you can privately message me. If you have any questions you want answered, please go ahead and make a suggestion down in the comments, and I will see you all next week. Take care.